That's all right, though, because I think you're about to get reinvigorated by our first speaker, who is going to be talking about historical European martial arts. I'm not even going to make an attempt. Zwerchhau?
So close.
Okay. You're about to learn the correct pronunciation of that word with the Z. Very exciting. From Andreas Fabis. Here we go.
So I am from Germany. I can pronounce it correctly. That's why they keep me around at the school. I think it's the only reason. Thank you so much for coming out to listen to a talk about swords. I'm very excited about it, and I hope you'll be too. A little bit about us. So Anthony, who is the founder and head instructor at the Austin Historical Weapons Guild, will be helping me, and my name's Andreas, and we're from the AHWG, and since 2016 we've been teaching people how to hit each other with a variety of weapons in a way that lets them go back to work in the morning without broken arms or missing fingers. Very proud about that. Real quick, HEMA, well, the H is important. It's the scholarly research and the physical training. It's the intersection. Well, it's nerds who want to be jocks and jocks who want to be nerds, so that's where we intersect. It's beautiful, and we're trying to take old sources, old obscure poems and sources, and try to make it into a living martial art. And in case you wonder what a Zwerchhau is, I don't want to wait till the very end to explain it. So, it is one of those so-called master or secret cuts from the German longsword tradition. And it has two major purposes. These cuts do have two major purposes. One is to break guards, and by breaking guard, we mean to pull your opponent out of that guard, not to break them. And the other one is to gain back initiative after your opponent attacks you. If you use one of those cuts, you may take back initiative. So that's those are the two main, in general, the two main reasons we have those. They were given specific names mostly to keep them obscure, so the peasants wouldn't know what's going on, and that's why they all have strange names. And then again, while they sound super awesome, sadly, it's not like the secret scroll you find in a volcano that lets you defeat anybody. They're useful, but sadly not that amazing. All right. Let's meet the masters, and especially Johannes. So here is a selection of 15th century sword masters. There were hundreds of them from the 14th to the 18th century. These are just a few, and we'll be focusing on the teachings of Johannes Liechtenauer. He wrote a poem called The Recital on the Chivalric Art of Fencing, early New High German, even for me very hard to read and understand. He lived in the 15th century. Supposedly he traveled all over the place to figure out the art and learn it from other people. And all we know about his life is basically the accounts of other people, his students, other masters. Little is really known. The so-called Zettel, the recital, is a long poem that basically summarizes his teachings, the techniques, but also just chivalric virtues and how to be a good person. His students then took that poem, added glosses, it is called, more detailed treatises, explanations, images, to give a better understanding of what he was saying. So the documents. One of the main resources nowadays, luckily we have it, is called Liechtenauer, and it's a wiki for the HEMA world where researchers, practitioners, archaeologists, scholars are collecting all the different sources. It used to be that you had to go to a library to see these old books, and it was very difficult to get your hands on them. And the very humble beginnings, you would get photocopied versions of it if you were lucky. And it was a very, very small collection of available sources. Now, with more and more research, all of these sources, or many of them, are now made available. You get high-definition scans. You can do your own research if you want to go through all the trouble. There are transcriptions and there are translations. So you can go and really study this from the very beginning. So luckily, we have this now. There are many versions of this recital, of this long, long poem, and you can see that there's 140 years between the earliest and the latest, so it's a little bit like the evangelists and the New Testament. And they all have slightly different wording. Sometimes it's good, it gives us additional information. Sometimes it contradicts, but there's a lot of material that we can go through. I'll talk about the earliest version. So this is what the recital would look like. If you would go to Liechtenauer and you wanted to go into it, you could of course zoom in and get a better look at it. But it was written in cursive, early New High German. And just to give you some context, Liechtenauer has 17 main, what is called plays. The master cuts, there are 5 of them, then you have several guards, and then you have several techniques and principles. And we will be looking at one of the master cuts. Here's the first paragraph from that poem about the Zwerchhau, so this should tell you everything you need to know. And luckily, we do have a transcription of this, and this is much better. Well, but luckily we have a translation of that, so now everything is clear. This means something. We're clearly fighting on top of a house. Yeah, I gotta be strong, and maybe we're doing some farming, and the head is in danger, so something's going on there, probably headache induced. So even transcripted and translated, it doesn't really tell you very much about what this technique is about. And that's, again, on purpose. So it used to be that this was a noble art only taught to knights, squires, princes and lords, and frivolous masters should not get their hands on this knowledge, as well as commoners who don't respect the art. And then the students, for example, Sigmund Ringek, he then said, I will make this more available. People who know how to fence should be able to use this and learn more about this art. So this is why, or one of the reasons why all of this is so cryptic. Luckily, we have the glosses. So this is additional information that Liechtenauer students and masters who came after him published to build on his teachings and to explain what was meant by those lines in the poem. And so this is what that would look like, right? We have the poem on top, and then we have a gloss that goes into detail what the technique is about, and we'll go into it in a practical part. So this is from Liechtenauer. Luckily, we have this information available to us. The glosses, of course, have different versions. And again, that is sometimes good. They give us additional information on the technique. Maybe they expound on the footwork or how to hold the sword or what this technique is meant to achieve. So we can study several of these sources to get a better understanding about what's going on. And then also, pictures were, yes, and kind of like the evangelists, there's a lot of who copied whom and who wrote what and who referenced whom. So on top of that, there's this. But we got pictures. And that's very good because even though they vary in quality, they gave us an idea about what we're talking about. And it was, the quality, I will say, take it with a pinch of salt because people at the time were not really good at depicting the natural world. So sometimes people have 2 left thumbs. We'll take it with a grain of salt. So all of this together leads to our practical work. So from theory to practice. So we have all these sources, we read it, we translate it, we gather it all, but now we put it to work. And there is a little analogy here. So in science, we look at the universe through observation, and we use the scientific method to form a theory, hone the theory through experimentation until we're really happy, and then it leads to an application of whatever knowledge we've gained or technology, for example. And my colleague and co-teacher James came up with that analogy, so there he is. And in HEMA, well, we look at historical fighting, but sadly no time machine available. We cannot travel back and observe those old masters who would probably also laugh maniacally at what we're doing. But anyway, luckily we cannot go back, but through manuscripts, accounts, archaeology, scholarly work, that's our lens through which we look at these treatises. And then HEMA, practitioners, scholars, again, archaeologists, work on an interpretation of this. And through experimentation, in this case, practical work, sparring tournaments, we see if our interpretation holds water and if it's actually a good one. And then over time, this will lead to applied techniques. So for example, at Zwerchhau that works and is according to the sources, or even a whole martial system. You saw already there are many masters who wrote many treatises, and we're only looking at one tiny piece of it. So there are many other schools of fighting. Liechtenauer's work has a lot of principles that are specific to him. So a whole martial system can be gleaned from this. Yes, James, thank you. There are difficulties, of course. We're not in a lab. First of all, sign of the times, yes. So language has changed. Maybe when we talk about the before and after and the in between of an attack, at the time, there was maybe a different understanding of what is time. Is it what happens between an action and a result, or does time just happen? There are many things that have changed over time, so we have to look at this in a larger historical context. Otherwise, we might not understand, even if we get a perfect translation, what was meant by this. So we might go wrong there. So it's more than just reading the text, it's also understanding what was going on, maybe in law or in general life, to understand what was happening. Equipment, of course, we all want to go home unharmed, so we're wearing a lot of safety equipment, which is good, which you should do, please wear equipment. But it might lead to a different style of fighting than they did at the time. If I'm not worried about my hands being hit because I'm wearing super high-tech gloves, then maybe I'm a little bit less careful with that, or stick them out more. If I'm not worried about being hit in return because I wear a helmet, maybe that makes me more aggressive in my attack. So we have to take that into account, that our safety equipment is awesome, but it might mar what we're trying to do. And then safety itself. At our school, for example, we really put a lot of emphasis on control and safety. If Anthony bops me on the head, that's a hit, and that I assume he could have also hit me really hard in the head, but he doesn't have to, because control is more important. But we're also fighting safe. We don't want to hurt or kill our opponent, and these were martial techniques. So in a way, by fighting very controlled and safely, we might also skew what is going on. And then finally, it's not lab conditions. If I fight someone who's 20 years younger than I and has done it 10 years longer and is left-handed and a foot taller, then how do I measure my technique versus that person's technique, right? It might just be maybe more aggression. So it's kind of hard to really measure, am I doing it right, by comparing it to other people. But nonetheless, we are trying to find interpretations that are supported by the sources. So we definitely want to do what we find in the historical texts. We don't want to contradict anything we find, otherwise we could just make the whole thing up to begin with. And why reinvent the wheel? They knew what they were doing at the time, so we'll go with what they said. It should be effective, even if we follow the text perfectly, but it never works in practice, then clearly we didn't do it right. So it should be effective. And then it should be consistent with the rest of this whole martial system, and not suddenly completely disregard everything else that, for example, Liechtenauer said. By constantly improving this, we hope to come to the best possible interpretation. And this is, thank you, James, get out of here. All right, so now we come to our approach at our school. And of course, this isn't the end all of it. That's how we do it. And we'll make it a practical demonstration in a bit, but it usually starts with a solo drill just to get the movements right, maybe simplified, we don't do everything at once, then a partner drill where your partner tries not to get hit, and then finally we turn up the speed and intensity and maybe add follow-up techniques to see what happens. So, dun dun dun. All right, let's see it. So, Anthony, if you would demonstrate. So, the thwarting cut breaks the guard from the day, which means it's a guard from above. It's explained somewhere else what that is, and all the cuts that come from above. And it is done like this. When we approach each other in pre-fencing, then stand with your left foot before. Hold your sword on your right shoulder. I stand against you, great, I hold my sword high. And then come before him with your hue and spring with your right foot, well on your right side. Wind your sword with the hilt before your head so that your thumb comes under, and strike him with the short edge against the left side of the head. That's here, and that would hurt a little. So, the idea is that as my cut comes in, Anthony jumps to the side, gets a different angle, and now I have to deal with this, or consequences might be dire. All right, well, let's demonstrate that real quick. I'll cut at you. All right, solo drill, do it. Very good. All right. Yeah? All right. Now, increased non-compliance. We'll put on mask for the last one. So I'm already feeling the pressure that he puts on, and I'd rather do that than continue my strike. One more. All right. You know what? You can do it. This is fine. Yeah. All right, so partner drill, increase speed and intensity. As I said, this is to draw me out of my cut or take back initiative. So it's important for Anthony to follow this up once he has it back. Right? Woo. All right, I'm dead. Thank you. Oh. All right. Well, and because there are lights here and people sit in sword distance, we took some video. It seemed safer, and this is from sparring. So I'll man the booth, and you can give some. Yeah, talk a little.
All right, so you can kind of see, we give you a quick one, so you kind of see what happens at speed, then we give you a nice slowdown. So you can see me up in the high guard. I'm baiting him to come high as he does. Sorry, as I do, he comes with the Zwerchhau. However, his execution wasn't quite there. He gets tagged in the hand. I'm able to cover, block his counterattack. And then, because, you know, it's a fight, you just keep going. We throw another cut as we're exiting distance and keeping each other honest and safe. So again, he tries to break, I catch him in the hand, and we slip away. So again, this time he's going up high, and I'm driving in with this Zwerchhau. So nice slow down speed, so we can actually see what happens there. So he baits up high. I enter with a cut. Not a great offline step, not terrible. Looks like I catch his sword. He pushes it away. I kind of press down. Like we said, this isn't a I win condition. I'm pressing through, following up with attacks, and kind of seeing what happens and what explores after the openings are exploited. And so kind of again the same thing. So here it looks like he's ready for it. He goes up high. I come in to go over high. I kind of telegraph my intention. He comes in under my cut with a Zwerchhau of his own, which is a deeper play we get into later, not today, and he catches me across the arm. So at this point, we've probably been doing this like for 2 or 3 minutes, so we kind of start reading each other's actions a lot better. So he sees the strike, comes in, cuts in underneath, striking me in the hands. And lastly, this is me baiting his counteraction. Instead, as you keep doing these things, lots of repetitions, something the masters don't talk about is because in the modern day of technology and internet, now everyone has access to these techniques. So you start being able to counter the plays in ways that we don't have sources for. Because back then, the goal was to keep them private and hidden, and no one knows what's going on. So now he knows his Zwerchhau, but I know he knows, so I'm able to counter my action, come in from the other side with the same technique, but it goes around, cuts off his attack, and moves in from there.
All right, and then after we do all this, the way to pressure test it, a little bit of laboratory testing would be to, first of all, of course, sparring in our school, which you just saw, but we fight the same people, we read each other, we know each other. I know how Anthony fights, he clearly knows how I fight. So there's, of course, still a lot to be learned here, but it's a similar fighting style. We all learn the same techniques. Then there are small local tournaments. We hold one, it's called the Weird Open in January, for example. And you meet people again, but maybe people you only meet 2 or 3 times a year. You might know them or not. So it's a little bit more pressure because it's more unfamiliar. Then national tournaments, where different school comes from all over the place with different fighting styles. You have high-ranked fighters. So this really puts on the pressure, and you will know if your techniques sound or not very quickly. And then there's international tournaments, and all bets are off. That is just yeah. So it's almost its own sport sometimes. They yeah. I don't want to say more. Anyway, additional avenues for exchange, as Anthony said. Now you have the internet, and you can go online and see how other people, other schools, other scholars interpret this. And it's interesting because there are some videos that are now 12 years old, and you can definitely see that as a community we have moved on to better interpretations. So some of them are almost comically, not wrong, but comically strange to see now after more and more people have gone into it and interpreted the sources and more material became available. But it is very nice to see. You can just see how other people interpret it and try it out and see if they have a better one. And then there's a lot of publications. So you have a lot of books that go into detail. It's translations, transcriptions with additional information, how-tos. Some of them are very academic, some are very practically oriented. And then our school here in Austin, we're part of the Southern Historical Fencing League with Louisiana, Oklahoma, other states. And we have workshops, we have sparring camps, and of course tournaments where we all meet. So this is how we exchange knowledge person to person. So that's really good. And then of course you have social media, forget social media, it's terrible. It's, if you post any opinion, you will be told how wrong you are and that you should die and probably stop doing this. It is a terrible, dark place. Don't go there. Well, this is as far as our presentation goes, as a nice a summary of how we approach this from obscure 15th century poetry down to working techniques that we apply in tournaments. So yeah, if there are any questions, we're more than happy to take them.
Thank you so much. All right, so do we have any questions from the room? All right, first hand up was back here. What you got? Make it good. And make sure, just as a general, this is not about you, just as a reminder, please make your questions questions and not declarative statements or manifestos or something like that. Just try to keep it punchy. All right, here you go.
I've actually missed like the first 15 what I've been told. I was wondering, do you guys have any cards, or let's say if I want to join, do you guys have any cards or anything I can actually search?
During the intermission, you can come and pick up the swords, see how they feel, blah, blah, blah. We have some information. And yes, it's all there. So come over, hang out, grab a sword.
I cannot believe I was just sitting there with the microphone like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, as opposed to giving it to you.
If only he would speak loud.
Well, at any rate, just for the record, in case someone didn't hear it, what's going to happen at intermission?
We'll have a petting zoo for weapons come over and lift one up and take a picture with one. It feels really awesome. And then you can, we have materials. If you want to join, there's some stuff there.
Thank you. All right, next question. Scanning. All right, we'll go back over here. Okay. That was a good first question. You have a good second question? Outstanding.
So historically, was this more of a dueling sport, or were these actual things that people would use in combat if they were fighting wars against other armies?
All right, now don't answer just yet. Hold on. Okay. All right, here you go. Oh,
He wants
all
me to
right.
feel this.
Switcheroo.
The short answer is yes. And depending on which sources you're looking at and what material you're looking at the earlier sources, especially Liechtenauer, it was definitely geared more as a martial type of system, a martial way to fight. However, once you get into the 1500s, warfare starts to change, and like longswords are the cool, sexy weapons on the battlefield, but they're not the primary weapons on the battlefield. The reality is you give a guy a spear and tell him good luck. When you get to later sources like Joachim Meyer, who has an amazing manuscript, the black and white woodcuts Andreas had pictures of, his was almost exclusively, I won't say exclusively, but his primarily a school fighting mindset. It definitely goes into more tournaments and dueling and those kinds of things. But I'll stop before I go on forever.
That was an excellent nerd answer. We loved that. All right. We got one more question. Oh, good. Thank you. All right.
Hi, yep. Nice. I didn't acknowledge that. All right. From the historical record, would you say that more of an offensive or defensive type of stance was used mostly in combat or in sports? What was most effective?
All right. Letting them confer for a moment. All right.
I got this one. So, at least with what we've talked about today, purely offensive. The short answer, the German idea has 5 words: Vornach, Indes. I don't know German, soft and weak. So soft and weak. But Vor, going first, taking the initiative in the fight, is the important thing. And the short answer to your question, because again, we can wax poetic ad nauseum and opinions and theories right. But the short answer is you want to strike first, because if I have a sword, he needs to pay attention to my sword. And if I can get him swinging at my sword and not at me, I can keep attacking him until he fails to cover.
All right. Now, I want to look in this direction. Are there any questions over here? Oh, a couple. Okay. Let's see what happens. I'm going to start here, end here. All right. What you got?
Do you view this more as a historical exploration or as a living thing?
All right. Who's getting this one? All right.
This is why I'm actually here.
Okay.
So that's a fun question, because HEMA's been around roughly 30, 35 years in some instance, but reality, the last 10 or 15 have been groundbreaking and changing, with Liechtenauer and honestly the internet in general coming more popular, available, and widely accessible. So for I'll say the old guard, and I'm only doing this 8 years, so calling myself old guard is generous because there are people doing it for 20 plus years. For me, it was very historical, because I was going through manuscripts, reading things. But at some point, if you come to the school, like for you, it's almost a living lineage, because now you're no longer learning Liechtenauer from the book. You're learning Historical Weapons Guild interpretation of Liechtenauer from Anthony and Andreas and James and our other teachers. So it's kind of a weird mix of the two. And I'm never going to tell someone not to pick up a book and read it. But I also know at the end of the day, most people who come out to train with us just want to swing swords, and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's both, again.
All right. So we're going to have our second speaker ask a question of our first speaker.
When you compete, how do you decide who wins?
All right. That's a good one to end up on.
So another cool thing that I like about HEMA as a whole is most events have vastly different rule sets. So we run Weird Open, and our rule set is single exchange. We'll have a pool of 8 to 10 fighters, and so you get one pass and you're done. And you have 2 judges kind of watch and see what happens, and you get arbitrary points based on where you hit the targets. But every tournament is going to have different points for targets and different rule sets. And again, you can have fully weighted after blows, so no matter who hits first, they both get full number of points. You can have subtractive after blows, or if I hit Andreas first and then he hits me, then I just get fewer points because of that. Some are just, if you both double, no one gets any points, and you both sit down with a loss. So it really varies a lot. Does that kind of address that question?
All right, awesome. We had some questions on Twitter, but I don't think we're going to be able to get to those. However, I will gladly share them with the speakers, and they can send us answers later that we can post up in the group. So with that being said, let's thank our speakers. Clap, 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 right?